Okay, hi everyone. The comments on this video will either be disabled or tightly regulated, probably disabled, because we're going to be talking about my policy on AI use for my production projects going forward. This is not a conversation or a discussion. This is not like a debate. Basically, what I've been doing over the last few days is I thought to be responsible, if I'm going to be in charge of some creative projects now and getting like other artists on board, I should be aware more of what AI tools there are, how they work, and basically just to do the benefit of the doubt, give them a try and see how they fit in with my philosophy. Because I've said in recent videos, or a recent video, that, I believe that AI generated outputs generally have no place in like creative entertainment. And I've got some semi-spiritual views about that, where I believe that the creation process is kind of sacred and that there will always be a demand for authentic experiences codified down into stories. It's just part of human nature. And more than that, like I believe, not to get a little bit, esoteric, that there's a collective unconscious layer to reality that is maturing as life in the universe matures, and that true experience is therefore valuable to reality. And that when we outsource the creation process of story to something that's non-conscious, insert the meme here, well, we may be improving our lives in some way with such technologies by making them more efficient. I think we are kind of devaluing reality. So I believe that while AI has such an important place in many fields, importantly things like mathematics and statistics and medical science, because I use it for data processing for my own medical studies, I think when it comes to the more emotional, the more humanity-centric side, I think we need to be very careful. And there may also be other forces among reality that aren't particularly happy with that. But I speak to a lot of artists, obviously, and I see a lot of views of other content creators that I don't want to be associated with. They're just really just fuck-ass basic and dumb, and like they haven't done any thinking about it. And again, not open for debate. I don't give a shit what anyone else says. I thought I'm going to take a look at this and come to a decision for myself. And what I'm doing here is I'm just reporting that decision so that when artists do work for me in the future, they know how we're going to approach it. And that's the end of it. Now, I did want to write this down, but that would just lead to procrastination. So I'm just going to say it as I'm aware of it. The bottom line is no AI generated output should be used in the final project or product of an entertainment piece, a medium for my projects. So again, if we stick to this policy, when you observe some animated content of mine, or if there's anything musical, no single pixel or vertex or no moment of sound, no sample should come from an AI generated output as a bottom line. So even if AI is used in the process, something imagined can only make itself known in the final output if an artist has actually inserted themselves in the process. Now, there are some technicalities there, because people would say, okay, what about denoising? AI-powered denoising. Well, there's a spectrum there between imagination that does not have a beginning and an end point, and what some people might describe as machine learning. We're wrapping the whole thing up in a decision process where the beginning and the end are already known. It's going to take like a little bit of explaining. You see, what I see a lot of, I was going to say non-artists, but that's not true, because even new artists do it. A lot of people I see that jump into using AI tools, they ask it to imagine something, generate this based on a very vague prompt. The artist does not know the end result. And in fact, they're not even putting an input into it. You think a prompt is an input? It's not in my opinion anyway. So something is generated without a closed circle occurring. An example of a closed circle from my experiments would be, I have done things where I sketch out a pattern on paper, something that may or may not tessellate, but I don't really know if it can. And I have a picture of sand. That's input. I put that in, and then with the prompt, I just explain what I want to happen here, trying to see if this will tessellate. I want to see it imprinted on this sand. Can you output? Now, if I sat down and I look at those two pieces of paper, I can visualize what the result will be, and it will be pretty damn accurate to what comes out of the AI. But the thing is, with that imagination, and it's interesting thinking about people with aphantasia, which is also interesting because one of the people I know that's most prolific with using AI tools has aphantasia, so they can't visualize things with their imagination. I think even though I can imagine the result already before I run the tool, I can't look at that imagination and like sketch from it. I mean, I can try, I can, work on the paper and imagine it, but I think one of the interesting things about the AI tools is I can get as close close as I possibly can to what I'm imagining, but actually have it as something that I can then share with another artist, in which case it's the equivalent of telepathy. It's the closest thing we have to telepathy. But do you see what I mean in this case, where we're trying to close the loop as much as possible by providing inputs and already knowing what the output should be before we use the tool, which is very different from people just running a prompt and getting excited with results and then throwing those out into the world. We're not doing that. A, as we said, no output should be seen by anyone else. And B, we're trying to already know the answers to what should be generated. So with that in mind, we got no AI output should be used in a final production. And if you're going to use AI tools for an ideation process, you should close the loop before running the tool. You need to provide an input, and you need to know what the output should be already, have it visualized in your mind, and try and get the result as close to that as possible. Now, what we're saying about telepathy there is this is what kind of separates AI tools for me from other tools. They say, oh, AI generation, the imagination, it's just a tool. It's just like, UV unwrapping. I don't think so. Not even close. You see, this is the first time we're doing what I think of as like cybernetic almost augmentation for the brain, because these AI generation tools are so similar to how the brain works, at least from my experience, in terms of like constructing vague images and then walking forward in detail. This is, I think, the first time we're looking at tools that can transcribe idea to paper, which is a private process, right, from ideation that has now become public. So for example, if an artist runs a prompt for an image generation tool and creates a bunch of, cool looking outputs, and a manager comes along and goes, that one, make that one, or we'll just use that. To me, that's almost the equivalent now of an artist sitting there and imagining a concept, and then a manager coming in, looking into your thoughts and pulling an unfinished one out and going, that one, before we even know whether it's possible or before any other thinking has been done. Because, artists, they go through the process anyway of thinking about the inspirations they like. And by the way, using their experience and knowledge and maturity regarding plagiarism to pay homage to things without directly copying. But there's this whole filtration process for an artist's mind that is private and inaccessible to dumb fucks in the environment. So when I look at things like AI tools for ideation now, and again through my own testing, I think responsible artists should use it in a closed loop fashion, in a way that's private, where managers can't see the outputs. Effectively, for my projects going forward, this is how we'll do it. No one in a manager position should be able to see any AI generated output in an inspiration phase, or really in any phase. They just shouldn't see any AI output whatsoever, because it's not going to be in the end result. The only people who should be able to use AI tools are people that fit within a certain criteria. One, artists that have qualification in responsibly managing input and avoiding plagiarism. And by the way, there are some courses online you can do for that. For me, I may just put together some educational material. And by the way, that's always been a problem. Even new artists that enter the space of just being an artist in general, way before AI tools, have a problem of copying from other people too directly. Even people like us, who make the tutorials, we see people flipping off our stuff all the time without credit. That's always been a problem. Artists learn to mature that and trust their own intuition and follow their own creativity more responsibly over time if they're a good artist. So in my productions, I would like it so only artists that are reasonably qualified in that regard, and we could prove that through some educational material, are allowed to use AI tools for ideation and not share any outputs outside of that qualified space, so that it does not contaminate the thought process of other people. Now, again, this is interesting. It's the first time we might have encountered tools where people aren't even allowed to see the results that aren't qualified. Because again, like I said, this looks like the first time for me that we have tools that can be so close to the ideation process of an actual person that for the sake of protecting human ingenuity and creative process, we need to now extend the privacy of mind into the environment. So what might that look like in terms of examples? Well, on my productions, I don't mind if artists use AI tools, hopefully ethical ones that are based on freely available material, CC0, not stolen from artists, if they are going into using it with a specific purpose in mind that they can visualize. So another example I might have, though, is something in terms of like research. So for the project I'm doing, there's a lot of pattern work. And again, we don't know if things can tessellate properly, and it'd be nice to distill patterns into equations. And these are very complicated things. So these are like unsolved math questions, because it's kind of where art meets mathematics and science in some way. So that is a valid use case for AI to be used, because we're doing research into what's possible. We know what the input is, a general sketch pattern. We know what the output should look like, but we don't actually know what the equation should be. This is sounding a little bit confusing because we're talking about text and image output at the same time. In this way, we're almost solving a mathematical problem for art, and I think that's a valid use case for AI for an artist, where we get two outputs at once. We learn the validity of an idea, how an artistic pattern can repeat. We learn what it should look like, even though we've visualized it, and we get a valid equation out of it. Now, importantly, none of that makes it to the final output of an animated short or something. We're kind of running tests in a way, and it teaches us something, and then we use the lessons we learned from that to then do art. Now that is, again, that's something that should be a private experience for the artist or group of qualified artists who know how to manage the data that was moved around, that the AI generated, that we put into it, etc. So that some dumb fuck manager can't walk in between the middle of it and go, let's use that, like a piece of image that the AI generated. You know what I mean? Responsible usage to learn something. Take a lesson, and then we combine that lesson with our ideas, our directions, and then create responsibly. So what about other examples? Image to video, again, no video output generated by AI should be used, so I don't really see much of a use case for that. Unless maybe, okay, so imagine we're sketching a creature, and maybe we're sketching the musculature for a creature, and we can kind of already imagine how it might look to move based on what we know about how animals, quadrupeds, whatever move. But we're having trouble figuring it out. Maybe it's something that's got 6 legs, and we're wondering how the soft tissue might look, kind of buckling up against itself. Then in that case, I think we could do something similar. We're running a test, an idea to say, okay, image to video thing. Here's our musculature and what we should look like. Let's try doing some kind of walk/run cycle and then see what it imagines. And then we can go, okay, thank you. We've learned something from that lesson. Discard the results, and then we proceed with our artwork. Does that make sense? You see, this is the way I think that, again, hopefully using more ethically sourced AIs where work hasn't been stolen, I think there is a valid use case for AI tools as kind of creative teaching aids within a project space, as long as we see them as teaching aids, but again, responsibly, so that we're not just copying it. Again, thinking back to newer versus more mature artists that have more experience in avoiding plagiarism. Another example I can give was I did a test recently where, I had a picture of me and a picture of my friend, and I was like, okay, I can imagine what we would look like melded together. But I thought, I just want to see it though. So we did the same thing again, gave the AI the 2 inputs and said meld. And what came out was, again, what I imagined, close enough to what I imagined, but with more detail. And I'm like, now we can use that as a lightweight reference before discarding it. Again, that's more of a closed loop thing. And you think, you know what, the result it comes out with is not going to be 100% matched to what you imagined. But I think that should be the goal of the artist in this case, is to get these 2 things as close as possible. Have a final result in your mind. And when you generate, if it's too deviated, think, no, that's not me. That's not what we're going for. Get it as close as you can to close the circle, and that gives you something we can hand off to other qualified artists within the space. All right, what about image to 3D? I played around with some of those tools, something that generates 3D models. Okay, again, no 3D result should be used in the production as an output. However, since we already have photogrammetry, where, I can look at something in the world, scan it, bring it into the space, I don't want any vertex to remain. I don't necessarily see a problem, again, if we're not copying directly and we're using responsible skills, building around it or building next to it and reconstructing it from there, and then disregarding the result. Basically using it as a 3-dimensional inspiration. And I think that a responsible artist will find that they don't want to do it 1-for-1 anyway, because usually the results aren't particularly appropriate. Again, they can be informative in a teaching way, oh yeah, we melded these 2 things together into this 3D object that was generated, but it's not exactly appropriate, but it's like an interesting simulation result. Do you want to plop it in your scene to help guide you while you make the actual thing, and then just disregard it once you're done with it? I think that would be okay. Again, nothing in the process is making its way to the end of the creation. The artist is still just there with the option of taking lessons from it. Okay, what about music creation? I played around with some local music creation stuff. I'm not going to give advertisement for any tool in particular. It was really interesting. But again, you look at music results and you think, that's not me. That's not my result. But the thing I found most interesting is, because I've always wanted to do music, I've collected lyrics over time that I've come up with. I would again try and do the closed circle thing where I have my original lyrics, I have what I think they should be said like in terms of a pacing. I give it the BPM. I describe the style of what I want to hear. And again, I'm trying my best to already have the output in mind, and then I generate. And yeah, it does surprise, but I think the important thing is, like I said, you shouldn't let it surprise you too far, because then you're not kind of sticking to your own genuine creativity. But it is interesting to hear it out loud. And I think, you know what? The gap that it's filling here is where you look at the verses that you have and you can imagine how they should sound and flow into each other, but the pacing on specific words is something that you just haven't managed to consistently nail down in your imagination. And what it does is when you generate a result that you think is close enough to what you were imagining, it just locks it into place, the idea. So I think it's helpful in that way. Again, you disregard the result afterwards, or if you keep it around as a reminder for how the line should flow. And even then, with the ones I've been listening to, there are changes that I would want to make anyway. But it's almost like saving down into memory, a memory of how your lyrics should flow that I would tend to forget anyway. Again, this is quite different from people that they jump into the music creation tools, they make a whole song, and then they think, oh, wow, that sounds cool, I'll post that. But that's not you know, you're not responsibly creating parallel to it with your own experience, like along that whole track, pun intended, I guess. So I suppose those are just ways to think about it. We're being parallel with the AI tools. We're not letting it take over a process. We're just looking to the side, asking a full circle question to it, learning a lesson, and then using that lesson to inform our own process. Another example I can give is code, right? So again, see a lot of people that don't have coding skills, they'll do the thing where they try and generate an entire program in one go, which is, you know, it has mixed results. When I've done AI-based code stuff, what I do is already on paper, I have an idea for how a system should work, and it's broken down into smaller chunks, like an API. Okay, I'm like, well, I need a little Python file that fetches this and then stores info here. And then I need another file that reads in that info and then generates this. And then another file that also reads in info and then does this. And then another file that combines these two results, which are also stored here. So I'm breaking it down into chunks because I already know exactly how the communication for the entire system works. So again, it's kind of working on different levels here. You got someone that tries to generate the whole thing in one go and doesn't really understand how it works, or someone who already has a design for the entire system and is just looking to the AI for lessons on how the individual components should be structured internally so that we put the whole thing together. Another thing I want to talk about is the enjoyment process, because there's no really getting around the fact, and I think it's a good thing, that AI tools are fun to work with because they generate surprising results. But that is also why I've always enjoyed working with like parametric tools in Blender. You know, you move a few sliders and something new happens, and that's fun. It's exactly the same thing. But that's also why I think AI tools should enhance artistic workflows. But I think they're being used by the wrong people. Okay, so as an artist, when you were younger, you might have had some moments where you were like, oh, I just had this fantastic idea for something. Maybe it's a video game as well, like whatever you want, or a movie. And you're like, oh, that'd be such a cool idea. And then you start getting like a bit of a tingly feeling because something you just imagined was really cool and you got excited about it. People are having the same feeling when using AI tools, like non-artists. They generate something, they go, oh, that's so cool, I get a tingly feeling. And they run with it, but that's not their creation. I'm sorry, it's not. When a regular artist has imagined something, they're doing it from their own data set, their own genuine life experience. What you're generating with the AI tool is not your own data set. Okay, it might be like a publicly accessible one if it's ethical, but if it's being sourced from a bunch of other artists, what you're doing is you're just prodding someone else's brain and it is generating something. Okay, that's just slavery. Not to like get too harsh with it, but in my mind it's adjacent in some way to like a prick from a few centuries ago whipping a slave into making a painting. And then the master says, look at this painting I made. I'm sorry, mate, you did not make that fucking painting. It was not your experience. Again, to me, I believe that there is some fundamental layer to reality that remembers things and that sees experience through conscious awareness. And I believe that is the measurement point that matters. And again, I don't think it can be comparable to previous tools because they're not built on top of the experience of real conscious living things in the way that so much of the AI art tools have been built off. You might not say the experience directly because they're not generating experience. They're building off the markers of experience, the threads that we are intrinsically linked to by cause and effect. Someone has an experience, they produce an artwork, the artwork gets put into a data set, you are now generating from that. In some way, through cause and effect, that person's experience is directly correlating to the output that you're prodding into existence. So again, for my productions, if if artists are going to use things, I want the artist, again, when qualified to deal with the outputs and the inputs and to understand the full circle process, I want them to have fun with it if they want to, because they're allowed to. Because when doing this in parallel, again, I'm imagining if the AI tool was a different person, although it's more of an amalgamation of, countless people, we as artists were already taking inspiration from the works and the styles and the experience of other artists without copying them directly, and certainly without taking their work and saying, this is mine. We were always doing that. Nothing's changed there. Taking inspiration because we liked them and we were learning lessons from them. And one thing I've said to my friends recently, including people that are starting to help on the project, is if AI can steal from artists, then artists can steal from AI. But again, steal is a bit of a misnomer here, because again, responsibly, we were never stealing from other artists. We were learning from them. And I think there is an important distinction there. So maybe I should amend it to say, if AI can steal from artists, then artists can learn from AI. And again, I think my philosophy here is fundamentally different to other people in, the Blender community, whatever. You might know recently, I don't really want to consider myself part of the Blender community anymore because I've developed disgust for so many people and other creators in the space. But some of them say, oh, the future is an artist creates a part of the input and then the AI finishes it off. And I'm like, you're just whipping another person again. Not that you would be able to understand the difference. I think to preserve the sanctity of the creation process and again, preserve human experience, the only thing that can be output is artist creation. Every pixel of the output should be created by an artist codifying their thoughts and feelings into it. But I don't think that means that they should be disallowed from learning from AI tools along the process. I have been disappointed, when I've seen other artists that, especially on YouTube, artists doing animations, particularly 3D ones, because, they're very complicated. And I remember watching their progression of skill over years. And as soon as they started putting AI generated outputs in their videos, but not addressing it, I lost all interest in their work. I haven't even gone back to watch the old videos I used to watch. It's just gone. I didn't really know how to vocalize it, but now I realize, kind of looking back, though the shorts were cool, what I was actually interested in was just watching this guy just making things and developing that over time. I just kind of always wanted to see where it would take their creative journey next. And as soon as the AI works got kind of intermingled with it, I was like, I can't see your skill progression anymore. I can't see you anymore as the creator. And so for me, meaning is lost. So when I see artists that are now substituting their creativity for the AI, basically rather than being parallel, now starting to become linear and having it interrupt the process, and also in that way, not doing the full circle thing, and instead just letting this exterior agency generate surprises that take them off the original creative path. I'm like, well, what's the point? What is the point in you creating anything anymore? You could just generate 1 million of these and none of them would have value. Because limitations define value in reality. Think about it this way, an all-knowing, all-powerful thing that can affect change in any way it wants, if it even still wants at that point, that already knows the answer to every timeline, is a meaningless existence. There is no problem to solve. It would be directionless. In fact, the concept of direction doesn't even apply. If it's just all-powerful and beyond everything, it would just exist in a hyperdimensional space where time doesn't really matter. All is, was, and ever could. It is just non-existent. The only thing that binds meaning and purpose to infinite energy is limitation. The conflict with the opposite. The more limits of yours that you remove of external agency, the less meaningful your output becomes. Now, like I said, this is not open for debate. I've been on YouTube long enough. I know what's going to happen now. Some people that are parasocially invested in this channel and watching me, no, actually, more likely the new people that come along. They have main character syndrome. They're going to look at this and think, this person is contradicting my view. I'm important in my life, therefore he's talking directly to me. Therefore, I feel like I am offended, and I feel like if I don't speak up, people are going to think that I am stupid, even though no one knows about you, by the way. So I'm now going to communicate this to him to make a point and prove that I am validated and I am correct instead of him. So those people are going to jump to social media or email because they've done this before. Every time I do something like this, and say, Curtis, you're forgetting about this. You forgot about this. They did it with everything. It would be so funny to go back, by the way, and read all the emails I got from people that were like, Curtis, I think you're forgetting a really important point about NFTs. They solve this problem. They do blah, 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 blah. No one gives a shit about your view here, okay? I certainly don't. Unsubscribe, fuck off. It's not going to change a thing. This is my view. It is here for reference. This is how I'm going to do things for the artists coming and working on my projects. How other people approach AI makes no difference to me, and how I'm going to approach it should make no difference to them. So if anyone, in particular, if any other creative feels attacked by me putting my views down here in my space on my channel where you came and clicked on the video, that is a sign of intense insecurity on their part, a general lack of intelligence, and an inability to compartmentalize their emotions from their opinions and their internal world with the external world. I am sick of people that want to try controlling a space when it doesn't fit with them. And we've spoken about that a lot in the Blender community recently. That is why I'm dejected and don't want to be a part of it. So that's the AI policy we're going to be taking here. Only qualified artists can use it for learning purposes when specific conditions are met. And on my projects, no manager will ever be allowed to see any output from any AI tool. And importantly, no result from any AI will ever make it to a final output. If you want to help support my projects or get access to production files and exclusive resources, you can do that. The silver $5 tier on Patreon. Or if you want to get access to all of my products and everything else, then there's the gold tier on Patreon as well. Thank you and have a great day.